Are you ready to become awesomer? Hello, everyone. This is Umar Hamid, your host, and welcome to the No Limit Selling Podcast, where industry leaders share their tips, strategies, and advice on how to make you better, stronger, faster. Get ready for another episode. Hello, everyone. Today I have the privilege of having a fellow Canadian, Cameron Herold, here with me today. He's the founder of COO Alliance and an author and all-around good guy. Cameron, welcome to the program.
Hey, Umar. Thanks for having me.
That is excellent. So excited to be talking to you today because your latest book, Free PR, is, I think, an essential guide to people because, if you get an authority, a magazine, a newspaper, a radio show to talk about what you do, it has more value than you advertising, even if you spend 100 times more.
Way more. It's funny because I actually had the manuscript for Free PR was completely written, and I sent it off to a CEO that I used to coach who's also from Canada, from Ottawa, and he was the founder of Canvas Pop. And I sent it off to Adrian Solominovic, and Adrian read through it. And he goes, dude, you've covered everything, but he goes, there's a whole area of digital PR that you never covered that is really since you left your Got Junk days. And I'm like, yeah, you're right. He goes, I could add to it. So he and I decided to co-author together. And he really took the book to the next level because I had all of the ways that, at 1-800-GOT-JUNK, we landed 5,200 individual unique stories about the company. But a lot of that was print, the print magazines, print newspapers, Oprah, TV, radio, etc. He was able to really help me understand the whole digital landscape in PR and really help take the book to the next level.
Brilliant. I can't wait to dig deeper into it. So you brought up Got Junk. And so tell me about how you got connected with the company and how you went from where it was when you joined to being a household name.
Sure. Yeah, and it took a long time to get to the night before we became the overnight success story for sure. So Brian, who is the founder of 1-800-GOT-JUNK, he and I were in an organization called the Entrepreneurs Organization, or EO. And I've always invested in joining masterminds and getting involved in coaching to grow myself. So I was in a forum group with Brian in EO for 4 years, and he watched me grow two companies. He watched me grow an auto body chain, which in Canada is called Boyd Auto Body, and now in the US is called Gerber Auto Collision. We took that to a very big level, took that company public. And then he watched me do it again with a private currency company that we built up and sold, a private currency company, similar to what Bitcoin is doing today, but we did it 20 years ago. And we sold that to another US public company. And then he asked me if I would come on and coach him on growing his Rubbish Boys business and help build it up. So they changed the name over to 1-800-GOT-JUNK. When I walked into the office, I was the 14th employee at the head office.
Right.
Having just left a company with 900 people, I was walking into a 14-person one. And when I left 6.5 years later, we had 3,100 employees system-wide. We'd gone from 12 locations to 330, and from 2 million in revenue to 106 million in revenue. We ranked as the number 2 company in all of Canada to work for. So just had some, a really good success, great company. We obsessed about culture, obsessed about landing free PR to talk about our company, and then just really pushed it kind of minimum viable everything. Just get it out the door. Momentum would create momentum.
So tell me, Cameron, we're going to break this interview up into 2 parts. First one, culture, because I think that's the human element in any company. And that is, where the greatest challenge for a lot of leaders lies. And then we'll go into the free PR.
Sure.
So when you came into the company with employee number 14, what was the culture like at that point? And when did you guys sit down and actually define the culture you wanted?
The culture when I walked in was very young. Like, everyone was 20, 21, 22 years old. It was a lot of people that had a lot of determination and excitement, but no skill. There wasn't any skill. And I say this with respect, but no one there had done anything before. The best job that anybody had had before would have been working at Subway, or working at a coffee shop. So
right.
No one there had led teams, had built companies. No one had been in franchising. So I recognized that we had to harness the raw energy of those people, and no one was making any money. They weren't paying the employees very well. The owner wasn't making any money. The franchisees weren't making any money. and they weren't charging enough. So I raised the prices by 40% in one day across the board. All 12 cities raised the prices 40%. And I said,
Okay.
we're going to go out swinging. Like we're going to try, but we're going to be the FedEx of junk removal or the Starbucks of junk removal. We have to charge accordingly so that we can then hire better people and pay better people and have better branding and marketing, etc. So that was the first part.
Okay, pause right there for a minute,
Yeah.
if you could. So you've got this great idea that obviously worked, but when you came up with it, there probably had to be some selling internally because the initial thought would have been, Cameron, are you nuts? This is junk. What are you talking about? So what was that conversation like, and how did you get them to go, we should do this?
Well, I had them recognize that the idea of junk removal wasn't anything unique. There were 17,000 independent junk removal companies when we started 1 800 Got Junk. So it wasn't like we had something new. We were just another coffee shop. And then I kind of walked them through the analogy of a Starbucks. And I said, look, you could go make coffee at home for 50 cents. You can go to the gas station and get a coffee for $1. You can go to, the corner store and get a coffee for $1.50. You can go to Starbucks and pay $3.50, or you can go to some new, the hipster coffee places hadn't even started, but now we're up to what, $7 for a coffee.
If you're
Um,
lucky, yeah.
right, and it's still just a darn coffee, right? But now we have the privilege of paying for the oat milk and the syrup. So what I got them to wrap their head around was we can charge whatever we want to charge. We just have to provide a service that matches that. And I said, what's the point of building a company if no one's going to make money? We won't grow. No one's going to be happy. We'll have crappy employees, crappy customers. So we need to charge more. So we positioned ourselves as the FedEx of junk removal and as the Starbucks of junk removal. And people started to get excited about it. And we rolled out what we called at the time a painted picture, which I call a vivid vision, which at the time was only a 2-page document, but it described the company 3 years in the future. And we tried to describe what the culture would look like and feel like and how we would be operating in 30 markets. We tried to give them a vision that they could see what the entrepreneur could see. And that's what began the excitement.
So tell me about the culture that you envision 3 years from now and how you went about actually building that culture.
Yeah, so what most entrepreneurs do is they try to forecast where they're going to be based on the past, right? They look at what they've done and they try to forecast where they're going to be. What I do instead is I lean out into the future and I decide where we're going to go. And when I know what we're going to do, where we're going to go, what it's going to look like in the future, then I can look at our current state of where we are, and you can kind of reverse engineer that delta. You reverse engineer where you're going to go from where you are, and then you just build it like you're building a home. So we looked at the best ways to build the business were first and foremost to make sure that we established that premium price. And soon enough, all of our competitors started charging more. So then everybody calmed down. And then it was like, how do we hire really great culture people who are really good at what they do, so that we can start building up that cult. So we taught everyone how to do interviews and recruiting. And then it was get the media to talk about what a great company we are and how fast we're growing, how good our culture is, which will attract more people to us. And we didn't have any money for marketing. There was no social media back then. There was no Facebook or Twitter or anywhere. You had to grind it out. And so we just kept everyone hyper focused and executed.
So knowing what your culture, what you'd like it to be, and actually getting people to embrace it in their hearts. Because, here in Baltimore, I can go to pick random 100 companies, walk in there and take a look at what they have written on the wall. Our culture is A, B, C, D, E. Then you talk to the employees and they're like, that's not freaking here.
Right.
So how did you actually get that in the hearts and minds of people so your customers felt it as well?
I think it goes back to the whole getting the employees to wrap their head around what is now a 4 or 5 page document describing the company. And every sentence of that document is a future state that they can figure out how to make that sentence come true. So it was looking at the foundational building blocks. If I think of every business like a jigsaw puzzle, the 4 corners of the jigsaw puzzle are the vivid vision, the core values, the core purpose, and the BHAG. But it's making sure that those 4 things are deeply ingrained in the organization. A lot of companies have core values, but they don't live them. Well, what we did was we fired people who didn't live them. We hired people based on the fact that they already lived them. We made a big deal out of praising people who were living the core values, thanking people for living, like giving them awards based on the core values.
Brilliant.
Like we really deeply ingrained those. And then we made it so obviously clear in the job postings that you'd better not apply unless you already live this stuff, because you're going to get ostracized and kicked out on your butt within 3 days if you don't. Like we polarized, and because we polarized, it was like a magnet pulling the right people towards us and pushing the wrong people away. Like we had no one working for us who was a smoker or sitting at home watching reality TV, because our office was filled with athletes. So if you weren't an athlete, you hated the place.
Cameron, can you give me an example if one comes up? One of your employees in the early days that lived up to your culture, where that was one of the stories you told. This is an
Yeah.
example of us doing this.
Well, there's one guy who in the job interview was just larger than life, just a huge energy, and he had, spoke four languages fluently, played professional soccer, had been a pro surfer, had written speeches for two Canadian prime ministers, had managed a bar, played cello in a symphony orchestra, like just a total Renaissance
In
man.
his spare time, he cured cancer. No, that's pretty awesome.
He ended up being he ended up being the head of the Green Party in Western Canada. Like, just he was a real
Oh,
Renaissance
wow.
man. But at 23 years old, I thought, people must hate you because you're too good. So I did 7 personal reference checks on him and 5 business reference checks on him. One where he was standing over my shoulder, and I called his current boss at the time because I just needed to do a gut check. But I had 2 of my current employees, a VP and a director, saying not to hire this guy because he was, you know, too wild or too gregarious. I'm like, no, you're just threatened by him. And because the reference checks came out so strong and culturally he was so strong, we hired him. I actually gave him his nickname in the interview. I gave him the nickname High Gloss because he was like higher gloss than a shiny paint. And
Nice.
High Gloss became iconic at 1-800 Got Junk. His name 20 years later still rings in the halls there. He's probably the reason we ranked as the number 2 company in Canada to work for, because he got us some big press coverage about ourselves. Yeah, he was an iconic figure who ended up in the wrong seat. He ended up in a seat that really wasn't a good fit for him, but we ended up realizing the best seat for him was putting him into PR, and he just took off.
Brilliant. And, you can take the college painter out of the company, so to speak. I like that high gloss title.
Yeah, he was just this iconic figure that yeah, to this day he's done extraordinarily well. He went on to become the head of PR for Best Buy, then the head of PR for Guitar Center in the U.S. Then he was the head of communication and PR worldwide for Sprint, and he's now back here as the CEO of a company in Vancouver.
Brilliant. So they were great days. So when did you decide to kind of leave Got Junk, and where did you go?
I left the day that I got fired. My best friend was the CEO, and I don't even talk about this much. I don't hide it, but we were having breakfast one morning, 6.5 years after the whole leadership team by this point had been replaced. So the 6 people that were on the leadership team when I started were now gone. I was the last one standing, and I was having breakfast with Brian, the CEO, and we had our leadership team meeting starting an hour later, and he said, "I think we're done." I'd told his assistant the night before he was firing me, and it was just that I was the wrong person to take us from 100 million to the billion. I was the
Right.
right guy to get us from a million to 100 million, but the wrong guy to go to the next level. And I couldn't adapt. I couldn't continue to adapt. The company, when you're an entrepreneurial organization with 12 employees or 100 employees or 300 employees or 1,000 employees, it's different than when you get to 3,000. And it had just become a very big business. So they took 12 months to find my replacement. They brought in the former president of Starbucks US, and she came in and said, "Wow, what a cute little business." Meanwhile,
Right.
I'm pulling my hair out. So yeah, that was 13 and a half years ago. Brian and I are still friends to this day.
It takes a lot for, kudos for you and kudos for him too, because oftentimes we hold on to the familiar, but we need to realize, I think there's a quote from Dirty Harry, a man's got to know his limitations.
Yeah.
And so, good for both you guys. And I suspect the new person that came in probably got super jazzed growing a company from 100 million on up. And now wherever she came from was like a much larger company. So a lot of times company owners think that we won't be able to attract talent, but there's lots of people out there that have done it, that miss those days of taking a company from X to Y, that come with so much more experience and are happy to kind of downgrade because that's where the passion is.
Well, it's also that you can take a company from X to Y, but you need somebody else who can take it from Y to Z.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
this now, unfortunately, she didn't work out. She ended up getting fired a year later because she was the wrong cultural fit. But then the next COO, who I've known for 30 years, he and I started a fraternity together in Ottawa. And I'd recruited him into College Pro. Eric Church has been their CEO or COO now for about 8 years, and they're now at about 450 million in revenue. So he's been a spectacular fit, but he was the right culture fit and he had the right skill set. He would have been terrible for my first 6.5 years there. He would have been the wrong guy, but wow, is he ever the right guy after me?
Brilliant. So let's switch over to your latest book, Free PR.
Mm-hmm. The whole
So, what
idea.
advice would you give folks that have a small company, a startup, to start getting noticed and get some attention?
So the first part is to understand how the media makes their money. So all of the media outlets make their money from advertising. So they need to have really good viewers or listeners or readers. And the more of those that they get, the more they can charge for their advertising, whether it's a podcaster or a blogger or a magazine, whatever. They need good readers or people devouring the content. So you're actually doing them a favor by giving them a story because it's really expensive for them to go out and find stories. They can't
Right.
afford to have the investigative journalism. Those days are long gone. So what you're doing is calling the up. I'll only phone the writer or the journalist or the podcaster directly. I won't deal with the media team or the news desk or the city desk. You contact the journalist directly and you say, hey, do you have 2 minutes? I think I have a good story for you. And they're all going to say yes to that because they want the next story and they want something dropped on their plate that inspires them. If they're busy, they'll say, no, I'm on a deadline. Just say, great, do you mind if I call you Monday or Wednesday next week? And they're probably going to say yes. So that's really the approach. And the second part is to understand that every business already has 3 or 4 angles already. So let's say that you're a small 10-person company. I'll give you 3 or 4 stories right away that everyone has. The first one is, it's how you started the company. You quit your shitty job and you had that entrepreneurial seizure and you started off your business. So you have that
Right.
entrepreneurial success story, and there's lessons in there, and there's inspiration in there, and there's hope in there. So they love those stories. The second one is that the hero's journey, right? It's the overcoming adversity story. It's when you almost lost the business, or you almost crashed, or you went through depression, or it's the big stresses and business crises that you've gone through. And when you're open and vulnerable with the media, they love those stories because it shares with others. The third one is the story about your customer, right? It's how your product or your service has really helped a customer in your space, and kind of how you were the ladder to the roof, right? And how you kind of took them up that level. And they love those stories. And you can have that same story market by market by market. So that's a really powerful one. And then
Brilliant.
then the other ones are, how you're leveraging technology or how you're leveraging culture, et cetera, to grow your brand. So everybody has at least 5 angles, and you can pitch those same 5 angles for the next 3 years.
Cameron, when you do get coverage, which is, really great to get, how do you maximize it? Other than just sticking it on your website, are there any strategies to take that coverage and really leverage it into something more?
Yeah. So this is where the real magic happens. And this is what 99% of companies have no idea. So if you think of a story like a log, okay, like a big chunk of wood,
Yes.
so you land a story. Well, that log just sits there, right? Whether it's Oprah or Fortune or Forbes. Like, I've been in every major magazine, every major newspaper, front page of New York Times, Wall Street Journal, etc. None of that matters. It's just a log sitting there. So you have to pour some gas. You have to light those logs on fire. So let's say I get 5 stories. Those are 5 logs just all sitting together. They're not doing anything. So how do I light them on fire? Well, I put them on my website. I share them on my social media profiles. I have a website page that's a media page. So now I have all the links back to my page, which drives SEO. When other media outlets take a look, they see that I've been on a few media outlets. So it makes it more apt for them to cover me. So that kind of leads to a little bit more stories. You share it with your employees, you share them with your customers and your suppliers. And those are all good things. That's how you kind of light it and you kind of get the spark going. But then how do if you pour gas on that fire, then it really lights up. So that's when you start driving ad traffic towards it, right? You share the story, every story, 5 times on LinkedIn, 5 times on Facebook, and 5 times on Twitter over the next year and a half, right? You purchase traffic towards it, you drive your customers towards it. So there's whole ways that you can actually be strategic with your marketing and your sales and your PR all working together. That's what we call the digital trifecta in the book.
Brilliant. Cameron, I looked at your website. By the way, whoever designed it did a phenomenal job. I'm super jealous.
Thank you. Which one? The Cameron Herold or the COO Alliance?
It is the Cameron Herold
Awesome.
website.
Yeah, it's a group called Influex. They're a great group.
One of the things on there is your speaking career. How are you managing that in the time of pandemic?
That's actually been an interesting shift. So I have done paid speaking events in 26 countries on 6 continents. So I've done a lot of speaking events globally and all through the US and Canada. And I've been speaking for about 15 years. Around 8 years ago, maybe longer, maybe 10 years ago, I actually did my first speaking event via Skype, and it went fine. The audience was fine. We did live Q&A. I had some slides. We talked. It wasn't necessarily the same as being live, but it was okay. So when all of a sudden we got hit with this in March, I thought there's an opportunity for me to speak to some audiences about how to grow during an economic downturn, because I went through the 87, 2001, and the 2009 downturns quite
Right.
successfully. So I've been through them. So I started sharing some ideas with different groups like EO and YPO chapters, and were paying me to speak over Zoom. So now I've been speaking all over the world via Zoom. I'm speaking to a chapter in India next week in Chennai. I was spoken to one in Pakistan recently. I spoke to one in Saudi Arabia. I've spoken to two in Australia. So it's been great for me because I actually, wake up, I can grab my coffee, I can sit down, and 15 minutes later be live on stage, and I can do my hour and a half speaking event to a group, and then I'm done. I don't have to go to the airport. I don't have to stay in a crappy hotel. I don't have to travel. The pricing's worked out good for them. So instead of me charging 30,000 for a speaking event, I charge 5. It seems like it's going great. And
Oh, brilliant.
I've also lost, to be honest, I've lost some big stages too, right? I was supposed to speak at Traffic and Conversion this year. I was supposed to speak at War Room this year. I was supposed to attend the main TED conference for the 9th time. So I had some big stages that kind of got ripped underneath me or out for me but I've been fine. It's been good.
That is brilliant. Cameron, before we part company, to our listeners who are salespeople, small business owners, what 3 pieces of advice would you give them to keep going on and how to grow their companies?
Yeah, I'm going to wrap it in a formula for success, and then I'll give you one kind of final closing tip as well. But the formula that they can all write down is the letter F times E equals success. And the first F is, how focused are you? How focused are you, or how focused are your customer, your team? How focused is the marketing team, etc. So you give yourself
Right.
a percentage rating of somewhere between 1 and 100%. Are you focused on the right customer, the right demographic, the right market? Do you wake up in the morning getting sucked into email and sucked into social media, or are you really focused on your goals and executing on your plans? So you give yourself a rating on focus, because most people and most companies are nowhere near focused enough. So maybe you end up at 50% focus.
Right.
And then the second F is faith. It's how much faith do you have in yourself and your team, in your plan, in the skill sets of your people? And what are you doing to protect your confidence and to protect your faith in that stuff, right? Are you getting coaching? Are you in mastermind groups? Are you getting coaching for your team? Are you working on staying grounded, staying grateful, and are you not getting sucked into the vortex of social media? So are you keeping your faith high and your confidence high? And you give yourself a percentage score there of somewhere between 1 and 100. So let's say you're 50% on faith. And then the E is for effort. And that's just how much effort are you actually putting into the business? Like, are you really working hard, or are you hardly working? And it doesn't working hard doesn't mean 16 hours a day. It just means like very, very focused, hard work while you're working. And then when you're not working, disconnect and recharge your batteries. But give yourself a rating for how much effort you and your team are putting in. And again, let's say you're at 50% effort. Well, if you multiply 50% times 50% times 50%, you end up with 12.5% chance of success. Those are
Right.
terrible, terrible odds, right? 88% you're going to go bankrupt, 12% says you'll succeed. Even if you get to 80% focus times 80% faith times 80% effort, that gets you 51.2% chance of success. 50-50. You might as well go to Vegas and throw it all on red. So to really be successful, if you get to 90% focus times 90% faith times 90% effort, that gets you 72.8% chance of success.
Now we're
Reasonable.
talking.
Well, better, right? Better, but still a 28% chance of failure. So what made 1-800-GOT-JUNK successful, what made all of the clients that I coach successful, what's made me successful has been to get the focus part to 98% focus, the faith to 98% faith. You allow yourself to waver, and then effort at 98%. And that comes out to 94% chance of success. It's just as simple as those three things. No one is ever going to give you an A grade. You don't need perfect. It's minimum viable everything. It's just get it done and get it out the door, because that momentum will create momentum.
Brilliant. Words to live by. Cameron, thank you so much for spending time with us today. Really enjoyed it. Took a lot of notes. And once this is recorded, I'll have to listen to it again.
Good, man. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Send me the link when it goes live.
Brilliant. Thank you. You can take a guy out of college painters, but you can't take college painters out of the guy that commented naming him high gloss. If you enjoyed this episode, please go to iTunes and leave a 5-star rating. And if you're looking for more tools, go to my website at nolimitselling.com. I've got a free mind training course there that's going to teach you some insights from the world of neuro-linguistic programming, and that is the fastest way to get better results.